Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are reacting to the first real documentary style video that CNBC did on Palantir on September 20th, 2020, which is basically when they were doing their direct listing onto the stock market. So Palantir went public in 2020, around September 2020, and CNBC is not necessarily the most objective business network in the world. Now, granted, I still like CNBC. I mean, I watch a lot of just CNBC just for like short clips and updates and some opinions from here and there. Guy Adami, I might be saying his last name wrong, is one of the most bullish CNBC contributors for Palantir. He was saying at 26, the stock price should be doubling. So he's one of those that's like one of the OG bulls of Palantir on the network. But the network doesn't talk about Palantir that much. I mean, it's not one of the most hype stocks. For everyone who says Palantir is a growth hype tech stock, it's not getting that much coverage on some of the major networks compared to like Tesla or Peloton or things like that. So CNBC television is different than CNBC. CNBC television has the Jim Cramer and Mad Money and all those type of shows. But CNBC is also a YouTube channel that does like business style documentaries where they try to give a really balanced sort of investigative journalistic approach, provide both sides, provide a lot of interviews, and try to come up with a decent 10 to 15 minute video analysis on a company. Today's video that we're reacting to is a 9-minute video they did on Palantir. I'll leave the original video in the description. You might have seen it, you might have not. I have not seen this video. I've seen like very few parts of it, and maybe I saw it a year and a half back, but I really don't remember anything in the video. So today we're going to analyze it, me in real time. If you guys haven't watched it, you'll be able to see it and you'll see my analysis in real time. And we're going to discuss how they covered the company. I'm expecting something a little bit more objective, expecting them to show both sides, and ultimately expecting them to show a video for 9 minutes that leaves the person at the end of the video wondering more about the company and having a better understanding of the company, not really having some bias for or against it. So having said that, let's get into the video.
After 17 years on the private market, data analytics company Palantir is ready to make its public market debut.
Co-founded by Peter Thiel back in 2003, its mission, providing software that customers use to integrate volumes of data from images to spreadsheets into a central platform where it can then be securely analyzed and interpreted.
News of Palantir's plans to go public, as well as its recent announcement that it will be relocating its headquarters from Palo Alto to Denver, has put the secretive software company in the spotlight. Best known for its work with U.S. government agencies like the CIA, the Department of Defense, and most controversially, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the company was founded following 9/11 with the goal of defending American interests.
The core mission of our company always was to make the West, especially America, the strongest in the world for the sake of global peace and prosperity.
But in recent years...
So that's really interesting, right? Imagine you're a first-time person just like who came across this video on YouTube because that algorithm recommended it to you. And you saw Alex Karp, like the CEO of this company, say, our core mission is to make America the most powerful country in the world. You're either going to have a super negative response to that. Negative in the sense of it's not that you hate America, but you're more so like, why is this company so political? Like, shouldn't they just be trying to provide a good product or service? And like, why are they like so aligned with the government? Or you're going to be like, wow, this is a company that is actually standing up for like Western freedoms, Western values, and like all the other tech giants really could care less about that in terms of how they, conduct themselves and some of the other countries that they choose to work with. So already you're going to get a polarized response based upon how Karp is communicating about the company. So it's really interesting to think about if you're a first-time viewer of this video.
Palantir has also courted customers like Airbus, Chrysler, and BP. Commercial customers now make up about 50% of the company's revenue, a number that's trended upwards over the past decade. And even though Palantir has never turned a profit, revenue has been growing as losses have narrowed.
Perfectly normal for a software company to show that sort of trajectory going into their IPO. The question is, does the economic model over time look like one that will eventually produce profits? And you can certainly get there.
But while longtime...
Yeah, that's the big thing to understand for any technology company. Like in the beginning, especially when you're going through an IPO, Facebook is a really good example. Facebook didn't make a profit for a good, when did they go public? 2012? I think it was like 4 or 5 years. They really were not making a profit. And the goal with a software company, this is the sort of whole Cathie Wood thesis. And I just did a video yesterday where at the end of that video is the explanation for why Cathie Wood sold some shares, was her analysis on companies like Palantir. And her entire argument was, I like that Alex Karp says, don't invest in us for the short term, because in these moments, you as a shareholder if you have a long-term trajectory, you don't want short-term profits. Like, short-term profits means you're not growing as a company, because growth means you're losing money, but you're gaining market share. It's that simple. And to gain market share, you have to lose money because you're spending a lot of money on expansion, which means it's going to cut into your adjusted operating margin. So for technology companies, it's a question of if the economic models exist for them once they reach massive critical scale for profitability to come. And with SaaS companies, software companies, gross margin on Palantir's products around 77%, that's like more than inevitable. The question becomes, can you gain the economics for that profit to then be meaningful? And, in the bull case model, in my DCF and a DCF video I did on YouTube, 35% adjusted operating margins is what you need for Palantir to really grow out and for Wall Street to like the stock. So you got to lose money in the short term, but as long as you're gaining market share, those short-term losses are only helping you gain momentum.
Some investors are eager for the company to go public. For others, confusion remains about what it is exactly that Palantir does, and why their work with law enforcement agencies has raised eyebrows. The name Palantir comes from the Lord of the Rings. In the fantasy series, Palantiri are spherical stones that help powerful users see what is going on in other parts of Middle-earth and communicate with each other. Founded in 2003 by billionaire Peter Thiel alongside current CEO Alex Karp, Joe Lonsdale, Stephen Cohen, and Nathan Gettings, Palantir's tech helps detect unusual or suspicious patterns in large datasets, using techniques that the founders learned working together at PayPal. The CIA was one of the company's earliest investors, and its only customer for a number of years. Eventually, other intelligence agencies like the FBI and the NSA jumped aboard, using the company's customized data analytics capabilities to track and capture terrorists, insurgents, and drug smugglers.
They cite Afghanistan and Iraq as two examples of places where soldiers were mapping networks of insurgents and makers of roadside bombs by hand. So they actually were bringing in technology to do things that intelligence agents on the ground were having to do manually in very dangerous places.
So this right here, for a first-time watcher of this video, if you don't know much about Palantir, I mean, that's a really important thing as well, right? So they give sort of the PayPal history. If PayPal, PayPal became successful because they were able to detect payments fraud on the internet. And like, as the internet was moving towards commerce, fraud was going to get more and more likely. I mean, PayPal just reported earnings yesterday, and they tanked earnings. And PayPal even said they identified 4.5 million like illegal accounts, like fake accounts. So PayPal knows how to identify fraud. It was one of the first secure payment systems ever, and that knowledge from a lot of those people that were in that PayPal group, sort of called the PayPal Mafia, Peter Thiel being one of them, then were like, what if we could create that fraud detection program for big data analytics, specifically for the government? And when the CIA heard of that argument, and they heard technology could replace decisions that people were making on the ground, that's when it was like, oh, well, we should probably invest in these guys and see if we can subsidize them as they build stuff for the government that could actually be really meaningful and helpful over the next couple of years.
The company's software has been credited with helping to find and kill Osama bin Laden. And though this has never been confirmed, Palantir certainly has not disputed it. The techs also helped to uncover Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme and rooted out Chinese spyware installed on the Dalai Lama's computer.
We work hand in hand with most of the special operators in the Western world. We work hand in hand with most of the clandestine services. We're in over 40 countries.
Today, the company increasingly works with high-profile commercial customers, too. Its first was JP Morgan Chase, which adopted the software in 2009 to monitor employees who might go rogue. However, the partnership ended in scandal when JP Morgan's special operations lead used it to spy on top executives. Others have continued to express interest, though. Fiat Chrysler now uses Palantir to identify potential faults in car parts. Airbus uses it to respond more quickly to manufacturing problems, accelerating the production of its A350 aircraft. And BP uses it to analyze drilling data, reportedly leading to a 10% increase in oil production in the North Sea.
So that's interesting, right? So in 2009, the company that JP Morgan was not the only company that had problems with Palantir. Home Depot had problems with Palantir. American Express had problems with Palantir. I'll actually put out a video later sort of expressing what happened. But Foundry was not that good around 2016 to 2010. Foundry started in 2016. Their basic data analytics before that was not the most phenomenal. Like, it was great for governments, but it wasn't optimized for the commercial sector as much as it needed to be, which is why they took so long to actually go public. Now, when working with Airbus, working with BP, 10% efficiencies in drilling oil. With BP, they're actually able to manufacture airplanes in a more efficient way and in a more effective way. Now the product is sort of maturing to the point where it's a product that has the potential to be a global software enterprise product and become sort of that modern operating system, along with being productized and have Foundry fit into tons and tons of different verticals, whether it's for crypto, energy, etc. So the question now becomes, is Palantir able to really penetrate all these different sectors? And we've seen over the past 2 years, they've been able to penetrate those sectors, but it didn't come that easy. They messed up a lot in the beginning 5-6 years. And you kind of want that trial and error from a software company that's trying to be like one of the biggest software companies in the world. But time will tell to see how big they can get.
This is a hefty piece of software that runs across an enterprise and is used for understanding everything that a company faces, whether it's their customers, their supply chains, downtime, geographies where there's growth, where their competitors are gaining share.
As revenue from the commercial sector has increased over the years, CEO Alex Karp has had to rethink his historical dismissal of salespeople.
We don't look like a classic enterprise software company. We have no salespeople. Almost everyone here is an engineer.
Not anymore. Karp's been building out a sales team, and in 2019, the company spent 61% of its revenue on sales and marketing. However, long-standing government contracts remain integral to the company's revenue as well as its reputation. And during the coronavirus crisis, Palantir has formed a number of new partnerships too, with the VA, the National Institutes of Health, and Britain's National Health Service, helping these agencies, as well as the CDC, to track the spread of the virus and allocate resources.
In order to make decisions right now, in order to know where the PPEs need to go, in order to know when and where you're going to reopen, you want all the analytical models, all the pieces of information all in one place. Palantir is really designed to thrive in a crisis.
But especially under the Trump administration, the companies work with ICE and police departments.
So before we get into the Trump ICE stuff, that's some amazing stuff, right? When the coronavirus pandemic happened, governments were going crazy trying to figure out how do we make the best decisions to actually solve this problem. And that's the whole goal of Palantir software. It's like, can we give a user of the platform, whether it's a government company, whatever, maybe one day consumer, the best tools, the best analytical tools all in one place to then make a decision? And in a lot of times you have to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, edge AI, and a lot of simulated models to be able to concretely create the mechanisms by which a decision can be given to a user. But that task in and of itself is the multi-trillion, billion, $100 billion question, right? Can they figure out how to use their software to get you an answer, to make your life more simple? And this is the multi-$100 billion or multi-trillion dollar question now that Google was able to answer, right? When you want to watch something, can you search something and find it for YouTube? When you need information on how to lose weight, can you search a word and find the right relevant information? Now, Google used it for advertising on their business model. Palantir is using it more as a sort of a direct enterprise service. But that's ultimately the question. Can they create enough analytical softwares that centralizes all the information, all the data an organization has, and give you an answer in a meaningful way? And how effective and efficient and productive can that make your organization? Is that worth money? And so far, we've seen with their growth over the past couple of years, about to do $1.5 billion in revenue for 2021. It's worth a lot of money.
Has raised considerable concern in the liberal-leaning Silicon Valley, leading Palantir to double down on its commitment to law enforcement and national defense.
So I do think this idea of nationalism and libertarianism is kind of intersecting in a very interesting way, and Palantir seems to represent all of that.
Protests against Palantir first gained traction in 2018, primarily in response to the company's contracts with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which are worth up to $92 million. The agency has cracked down on illegal immigration through workplace raids and separating families at the border.
My house has been protested for many months, almost every day. Our offices have been protested. Many Palantirians protested against it internally. Some people were so upset by it that they left. These are very hard decisions.
Co-founder and board member Peter Thiel is probably President Trump's most famous Silicon Valley backer, donating $1.25 million to his 2016 campaign. Karp's politics differ, but he says that Palantir remains fully committed to aiding the U.S. government.
I've never stopped being critical of this administration. I'm not planning to vote for this administration. So there are things I do differently. The core issue, though, is who decides. The small island in Silicon Valley that would love to decide what you eat, how you eat, and monetize all your data should not decide who lives in your country and on what conditions. There are elections, there are rules, they should be enforced.
Karp's ethos also holds true for Palantir's work with police departments from New York City to Los Angeles, New Orleans, and Chicago, who have used the tech for surveillance of criminal suspects and predictive policing, a tactic that civil liberties groups say leads to over-policing of minority neighborhoods. But can Palantir really claim to be above the political fray?
I understand the desire to be neutral and to kind of say, hey, we're going to play by the rules. That is a logically coherent stance if companies are also neutral with regard to who makes the laws. But hold on, if you're willing to back political factions with your own money, you can't say, well, in this aspect of our business, we do influence policy and politics, but over here, we are politically neutral. It doesn't work that way.
Other tech
I don't really understand that argument. So first of all, with the whole ICE thing, I have a video coming out. I actually probably already released the video. Just like I'll put it in the description. I do an in-depth analysis of the ICE Palantir relationship. You should definitely watch that. It sort of goes more in depth on that. But this argument that guy made is kind of weird because Palantir is not donating money. Peter Thiel is donating money. Right. So that's different, right? Like Peter can donate whatever the hell he wants. It's his money. So if he wants to support Trump and give him $1 million, that's his money. That's the nature of being a free country. You can do what you want with your money, freedom of speech. But Palantir was not making a political donation. So even though the company is neutral and one of its founders is not neutral because individuals usually are not neutral, I don't think that's Palantir to necessarily blame for.
companies like Google have backed out of controversial contracts with the Defense Department, but Palantir sees that as an abdication of responsibility.
Peter and I built a very patriotic company. Google's clearly not a patriotic company.
Karp also hit back against the culture of the Valley in the company's S-1 filing to go public.
Here's what he had to say. The engineering elite of Silicon Valley may know more than most about building software, but they do not know more about how society should be organized or what justice requires. Our company was founded in Silicon Valley, but we seem to share fewer and fewer of the technology sector's values and commitments.
In August, the company announced it will move its headquarters to Denver, Colorado, likely both a financially and morally motivated decision.
The Valley is basically sold its soul to an advertising model where it's okay to sell your data, but it's not okay to support the country.
Look, I mean, that part's true. Like, we cannot get away from that part. The Valley, Silicon Valley, every tech startup that exists right now, and I know because I have a tech startup, is run through an advertising model, right? Like, the way they make money is by getting data from users, putting it in an algorithmic feed, and then serving ads within that feed. And those ads are highly effective because Facebook and YouTube really perfected that model, and Instagram. Well, Facebook owns Instagram, but in Twitter, you get the point, right? The biggest tech giants in the world figured out how to get people's stuff all in one place, centralize it, and then show really good targeted ads while people are scrolling through it. Like, it works. It works better than TV ads. It works better than radio. It works really, really well. As a result, the major tech companies that exist, they only really monetize through your data, right? They have to get data from you in order to create an advertising infrastructure that is effective enough for advertisers to actually target. And they need your attention, which means the content has to create a lot of dopamine mechanisms. Like, there's a lot of dynamics to how Silicon Valley companies have become the biggest tech companies in the world. And the reason we don't care that much about these tech companies, or we don't like hold them to as high of a moral standard when it comes to like government and politics, is because it's in communications. They're in the communications niche. And when companies are in the communications niche, everything feels better. Right? So like when you send out a tweet and you're like LeBron and you sent out a tweet and it gets a ton of retweets, like you overlook all of the things that Twitter has to do in order for you to actually get that level of reach, which is create a really big advertising model, because it's just a tweet. Like, it's just like 17 characters. Why does it matter? Or it's just a photo on Instagram, or it's just a video on YouTube. The fact that these communication platforms are rooted in expression and creativity at its core delegitimizes a lot of the subconscious fears we may have about these technology companies ultimately using our data to create these advertising-driven business models because of the creativity and self-expression and communications model that the companies sell, right? An oil and gas company seems super dirty, but Instagram, which theoretically is, you could say, is worse than oil and gas company, I'm not saying that, but you can make the argument for it, is less dirty because it's about communication, it's self-expression. You see this dog, you see this like 3-year-old eating a cupcake, right? So like, this is a really, really interesting thing to think about in terms of how communication companies have been able to advert the noise that other companies like a Palantir, in terms of the moral backlash they would get, even though it can be very argued that those companies have sold out to advertisers and have done a net harm on the world. Now, I wouldn't argue that they've done that. I think the creativity and the explosion of creativity and the explosion of freedom of speech that they have allowed average people like myself to gain an audience is a net good thing, but it's hard to ignore that and then just say Palantir or companies like Palantir are absolute garbage, right? I think it's really important to contextualize how we think of those things.
And they didn't want to be part of that ecosystem and didn't feel that ecosystem was aligned with their values.
So what does all this controversy mean for investors? For those who believe in Palantir's mission, it could be an asset. And for those with qualms, while it ultimately may not mean much.
The general belief around the Valley is that public market investors in particular talk a big game about governance and about things that they view as acceptable and unacceptable, and then they buy the stock anyway.
Though Palantir is yet to turn a profit, this isn't of considerable concern to investors, who are used to betting big on tech companies operating at a loss. What will affect the company's value is whether investors view it more as a high-growth tech company or a lower-margin consulting firm.
That combination makes this a bit of a Rubik's Cube for investors because it's not a pure-play software model.
For most of its history, Palantir has spent heavily on software customization services for both government agencies and large corporations.
It is a very costly business to run, but if they can automate their own processes and have a more efficient sales process and get the biggest customers to continue to buy more, then their operating metrics do improve over time.
As of late, that's what Palantir has been trying to do. And now it offers two fixed-fee platforms, Gotham for government clients and Foundry for the private sector. The company's target market is said to be the 6,000 companies that make $500 million or more in revenue.
The average customer spends over $5 million a year on Palantir's product. The top 20 customers account for roughly 2/3 of their revenue. They say they only have about 125 customers. So this is fundamentally different than your Zoom and your Slack. It is not for everyone.
In 2015, when Palantir raised its last funding round, the company's valuation was upwards of $20 billion. But lately, share prices have been all over the map, indicating a valuation range of anywhere from less than $10 billion to over $20 billion.
They're trying to show investors that they do have this really big market opportunity, that they have a bunch of potential customers out there, and that's where the skepticism is.
The true value will be clarified at the end of September when Palantir completes its direct listing, a process that is similar to an IPO, except that the company won't sell any new shares. It will just unleash those held by existing investors. Thus, the shares will be priced based on investor demand, and if the stock trades higher than expected, that value won't be handed to brand new shareholders.
I think the Palantir IPO is going to signal to venture investors and others that serving the Department of Defense and military business is going to be worthwhile.
Karp certainly hopes so, saying that the future of our nation depends on it.
The country with the most important AI, most powerful AI, will determine the rules. That country should be either us or a Western country.
Palantir doesn't do business with China, the U.S.'s main competitor when it comes to AI.
So if we bring our A game, we will win. If we bring our D+ game, because most people in the Valley live on an island where this seems like a questionable project, they will win.
All right, there you go, folks. There you have it. I thought this was a good video. Thought this was a good ending. Yeah, I mean, ultimately that sums it up at the end, right? Palantir's a controversial company. Still trying to figure out the economics of its model. This was in September 2020. Now we're in 2022. So we've had a year. We've really seen their growth, really seen their projection, really seen their revenue growth, really see their clientele and customer growth. I just did a video yesterday about like literally 14 deals they've done in the past 2 months. It's absolutely insane from December 2021 to January 2022. They've done a lot. They've been all over the place. They've done a lot. They've really tried to get things out there and they've tried to make a name for themselves. I think the final thing here is what Karp said at the end, which is a country that has the most powerful and important AI will make the rules. That country should be a Western country, and ideally should probably be the U.S. since we're the world's greatest democracy. And if Palantir can attack that governmental market and secure the lucrative deals that are required to make us the most powerful software country in the world through AI, and take that same software and give it to the 6,000 companies that make $500 million or more in revenue, there's a big market opportunity here. And then we can see what else they can figure out over the next couple of years in terms of the products that they can release to the world. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys thought about this video. I thought this was pretty fair coverage by CNBC. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. My name is Bit. I'll see you in the next one.